Hello and welcome. Today we are exploring a common situation. What if moving in with your adult children wasn't the dream retirement you imagined? What if, instead of a peaceful life, you found yourself feeling more like a burden or even an unpaid housekeeper? These are questions many elderly parents grapple with as they consider the realities of living with their adult children. Today, we're diving into the stories of those who faced these challenges head-on, exploring the complex dynamics that can arise when parents and adult children share a home. We'll share real-life experiences that highlight why living with your children in old age might not be as beneficial as you once thought. Let's start with the story of Mrs. Zhang, a 62-year-old mother of two. After retiring, Mrs. Zhang moved in with her son and his family, hoping to enjoy the company of her grandchildren and the comfort of being close to her loved ones. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Her daughter-in-law welcomed her warmly, and her son reassured her that she wouldn't have to worry about anything. But as the weeks turned into months, the atmosphere began to change. At first, Mrs. Zhang was asked to help with small tasks around the house, folding laundry or watching the children for a few hours. However, these small requests soon escalated into expectations that she would take on all the household chores, from cooking meals to cleaning the entire house. Mrs. Zhang found herself spending her days doing housework with little time for herself. Her plans for a relaxing retirement, filled with gardening and socializing with old friends, were slipping away. One weekend, Mrs. Zhang's son and daughter-in-law informed her they were going on a 4-day vacation and expected her to look after the children and manage the household in their absence. They didn't ask if she was okay with it, they simply assumed she would agree. This was the final straw for Mrs. Zhang. She realized that instead of enjoying her retirement, she had become an unpaid servant in her own son's home. Feeling both angry and disillusioned, Mrs. Zhang made a bold decision. She told her son that she needed to visit an old friend for a few days and left their home, returning to her hometown. There, she finally started living the retirement life she had dreamed of, gardening, meeting friends for tea, and enjoying her independence. Mrs. Zhang realized that, while she loved her family, living with them wasn't worth sacrificing her peace of mind and happiness. Mrs. Zhang's story is not unique. Many elderly parents who move in with their adult children find themselves in similar situations. The expectation of mutual support often turns into a one-sided arrangement where the parent is expected to contribute significantly to the household, often at the expense of their own well-being. Take the case of Mr. Li, a widower in his late 60s. After his wife passed away, Mr. Li's daughter invited him to live with her family, worried that he might be lonely on his own. Mr. Li accepted the offer, hoping it would bring him closer to his grandchildren. However, once he moved in, he quickly realized that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Mr. Li's daughter had her own ideas about how the household should be run, and she expected her father to adhere to these rules. This included everything from strict meal times to how the grandchildren should be disciplined. Mr. Li, who had always been a laid-back and easygoing person, found the rigid structure of his daughter's home stifling. Moreover, his daughter's expectations that he would contribute financially to the household added another layer of stress. Mr. Li began to feel that he was not just living with his daughter, but that he was a guest in her home, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. The situation reached a tipping point when Mr. Li's daughter criticized him for the way he interacted with his grandchildren. She felt that he was too lenient and that his influence was undermining her authority. Hurt and frustrated, Mr. Li decided it was time to leave. He moved out and found a small apartment nearby where he could visit his grandchildren on his terms without the constant pressure of living under his daughter's roof. For Mr. Li, regaining his independence was a turning point. He was able to reconnect with friends and pursue hobbies that he had neglected while living with his daughter. More importantly, the move helped improve his relationship with his daughter, as they were no longer in each other's space 24/7. Mr. Lee realized that maintaining a healthy distance was key to preserving the bond with his family. These stories highlight the importance of boundaries and the potential pitfalls of co-residence with adult children. When parents move in with their children, it can blur the lines of independence and create a dynamic where the parent is seen more as an additional responsibility than as a valued family member. This can lead to feelings of resentment on both sides, as the parent may feel exploited or underappreciated, while the adult children may feel burdened by the extra responsibility. There's also the story of Mrs. Chen, who moved in with her son after her health began to decline. Her son was eager to have her close, thinking it would be easier to care for her. However, the reality was far more complicated. Mrs. Chen, who had always been fiercely independent, struggled with the loss of autonomy that came with living in her son's home. She found it difficult to adjust to the new routines and the lack of control over her own life. The situation was further complicated by the fact that her daughter-in-law was not comfortable with having her in the house. The tension between Mrs. Chen and her daughter-in-law soon became palpable, leading to frequent arguments and a strained atmosphere. Mrs. Chen's health began to deteriorate further, not just because of her physical ailments, but due to the stress of her living situation. She missed the freedom of her own home and the ability to make her own decisions. After much deliberation, Mrs. Chen decided to move into an assisted living facility where she could receive the care she needed without the emotional strain of living with her son. This decision, though difficult, ultimately improved her quality of life, allowing her to regain a sense of control and independence. These examples underscore a critical point. While the idea of living with adult children might seem appealing in theory, it often comes with challenges that can strain family relationships. It's crucial for both parents and children to have open, honest discussions about expectations, boundaries, and the realities of living together before making such a decision. Each party must respect the other's needs and autonomy to avoid the pitfalls that can arise from co-residence. While the concept of multi-generational living can offer benefits, it's not without its challenges. The stories of Mrs. Zhang, Mr. Li, and Mrs. Chen illustrate that sometimes the best way to maintain strong family ties is to live separately, allowing each generation to enjoy their independence while cherishing the time spent together. For many elderly parents, living independently, even with some outside support, can provide the peace, autonomy, and fulfillment that are essential for a happy retirement. Your feedback motivates us to create more content that can make a difference in your daily life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next videos. Thank you for your time, and please enjoy the life you have.